Hello, Tracy Ferrant here. So I'm talking about ego statements and why we ought to question ego statements. There are different statements of confidence versus statements of ego. Ego is built on a false premise. It is built on a false premise. And so confidence is great, but ego, it's dangerous. And sometimes people lead with these ego statements and people pick the wrong messages. And it's important for us to question them and not to be so quickly adaptive. Right? So, ego statements. And I'm not referring to exceptions where somebody, this is your truth, this is what you believe in, and so this is your mantra or your life. I'm not talking about a standard where you're saying, this is my standard. Or where you say, you know what? Life is tough. Life is tough. We have to be tough. I'm not referring to that. Or any other exception. I'm talking about just general ego statements that people make. And it doesn't sit on a good foundation of insight and foresight and logic and taking all things into consideration. Or having the backative to say, this is why I'm making this statement. I'm talking about something that is just grounded in ego. So I had a quote, but I can't remember the quote. So I'll just give two examples, which are not the best, but you can just pick the gist of what I'm saying. So I was reading something online where they're talking about two things about teachers, the salary of teachers, as well as the behavior of some students. And one of the attitude was, oh, that's what they're paid for. They should have chosen a different job. That's what they're paid for. That's what you get. And then another statement was, oh, well, that's a part of the job. That's a part of the job, so what? Bear in mind that a teacher is not paid to be abused by anybody, neither by the child or the school colleagues or the parents. A teacher is not, that's not a part of the deal. A teacher is there to provide service and to manage a classroom during the hours. And of course other things, but that's the fundamentals of it. At the end of the day, the parent is the one who has the power. So even if the parent is not in the classroom, at the end of the day, if anything happens, it is the decision rests with the parent. So the teachers don't have the power. So the power is with the parent. And at the end of the day, it is my belief that the parents should provide some fundamental discipline within the child. Not a perfect child, but where the child comes to the classroom and ready to learn. And any other little behavior, the teacher can manage that. But fundamentally, the child is disciplined. That is my belief. So it is not for the kid to be abusing the children. One child at home, two children, difficult to manage. Can you imagine managing 20, 40 kids? And 40 kids, not just with everyday behavior, sleeping or drawing or just talking to it. No. Where kids want to put their hands on teachers. That's not what they're paid for. So when people make these power statements, I was a little shocked. These ego statements. It's not a power statement, an ego statement. That's what they're paid for. That's the job they chose. Oh yeah, they're abusing the teacher and telling them, curse words or putting hands on them. So what? So what? That's what they're paid for. And you can see the mentality of people and why sometimes things don't get better. Anyhow, those kind of statements that people made so cold and callous, not solution oriented, not just being very like, so what? That's what you paid for. So what? You took a poor job. So what? The other example is, you remember the financial crisis was 2007, 2008? The global financial crisis. And for example, this is just my general sense. Somebody says, okay, the government says, I want $2 trillion. I want $2 trillion. I want $2 trillion. And they say, okay, we're going to reduce interest rate by 2% or by 1%, whatever the margin is. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to collect that so people can get more houses. So we can get more people paying out of their pockets from their income. And they're saying, but yeah, but if you reduce the interest rate, it's going to affect 50 million people. After a while, these people are not qualified. They're not going to be able to pay for it. Well, and what about the businesses and the small businesses and the large businesses? It's going to affect them too. Or this things like that. Or they say, let's reduce the criteria. And therefore, but they're saying, but if you reduce the criteria, why don't you consider another solution instead of that way? Why don't you give it another year to think about coming up with that $1 trillion? No. We take our emotions out of it. Yeah, but it's not going to be just the $2 trillion. Down the road, it's going to be like $6 trillion. And it's going to have a ripple effect. That's going to affect not just this sector, the housing sector. It's going to affect health care and education and every other area. Well, that's not for me to think about. In a sense, it's correct, but in a sense, it's not correct. So let's say the person is a chief financial actuary or economist or whoever makes the decisions at the governmental level. And they say, oh, that's not for me to think about. And you take your emotions out of this. When you get to my level, that's what you do. But at the end of the day, that's why we're on this planet. You must balance a goal with people. You must balance that. It cannot just be one or the other. You have to strike a middle. No. That's not for me to think about. But at least, maybe it's not for you, but at least for you to bring it to the attention of the person who is making the final decision. Oh, no, that's what I do. That's what we do. And that's why I sit in the seat and not you. Sit in the seat and not you. And you find these people make these ego statements, and later on, you find 5 years down the line, 100 million people are suffering. The world is suffering. 2 million people are suffering. The health care, there are no beds in the hospitals. They start to privatize. They start to do all these things. Taxes have increased. That's the annual budget announcement in Parliament and Senate or whatever caucus. And they do these things. And they don't think. So it's not a decision based on confidence or the ability to manage. Yes, it's difficult, but we have to make the decision. No. I'm talking about people who make it strictly out of ego. They love that pat on the back. They love being callous. They love being brutish. So what? That's a job you chose. You chose a poor job. So what? You chose a poor job. So what? The kids are abusing you. So what? And they take that kind of very callous attitude. So what? We don't care. My job is to get that $2 trillion. Whatever the nation or the world pays for it down the line. Who cares? You take your emotions out of it. And so they don't balance things. So, as I said, confidence is grounded in the fact that I have to balance everything. At the end of the day, that's why we're on this planet. That's why we're on this planet, right? You have to take all things into consideration. And you have to have insight as well as foresight and grounded in logic. But some of these people where ego is based on, ego discards logic. Ego discards not only emotions, but ego discards logic. It discards the future. Ego discards the future of people. It put the risk of the nation, it put the risk of education, it put the risk of health on the line just for one person's ego or a group of people's ego. That's what ego is, dismissive of facts. Ego is dismissive of the future. But confidence says, let me take all things into consideration. Even if I have to make a tough decision, let me calculate this and that and see the possibilities. And so I would just say, be cautious in terms of whether we see it's a motivational speaker or somebody in the public eye or at school, at work, in our friend circle, making these egocentric statements. And sometimes it comes back to bite them. Just be mindful of the things and the people that we copy. Because as we look on and say, oh, this person is so amazing. No. Don't be dazzled by ego. Be dazzled by confidence. Be dazzled by that which is good. As I said, confidence leads to good decisions and outcomes. And ego does not. Ego is reckless. So whether it's be mindful of just people just callously making these statements to set themselves apart and put themselves on mountain tops. So confidence leads to good decisions. ego disregards the future and everyone else.